It is Saturday, December 2nd, 2023. Good morning to you all who are tuning in live, and greetings to you watching us a little later in the day. This live stream is meant to dovetail nicely with what I'm talking about later today. But if you're watching this later, then it's probably already gone live. At 7 a.m. Central Standard Time, I will have for you a report on an open letter to traditional Catholics from across the traditional spectrum, essentially calling for people to not lay aside their different personal hypotheses on the nature of the crisis in the church, but to not let them divide us further. And it's an important message. It really is. It's really kind of been my philosophy the entire time I've been doing this, because I don't get involved in a lot of people's different hypotheses on whether Francis is a valid pope or not, or on sedevacantism, or on the very finer details of recognize and resist. I'm always been pro SSPX, also pro FSSP, and in general, I think more traditional liturgical options and places to learn the faith, as it had been understood since the beginning of the church, more options for that are better. And this is an open letter from scholars that are calling on people not to, set aside their cherished and their deeply held convictions on things, but to actually not essentially excommunicate one another over these differences of opinions. And I'm going to begin this by mentioning that this letter has already gotten a couple of different types of responses that were negative. One from, I'm not going to name names here, because I'm not trying to stir the pot, but some well-known sedevacantists issued their own statement basically saying anything but sedevacantism is the message of the letter, which is not the message of the letter. And really, from the particular wing of sedevacantism they represent anyway, it's their position is, their statement is essentially, or a good response to it is pot, meet, kettle, because here their position has always been to call anybody who's not a sedevacantist, and probably their particular brand of sedevacantist, a false trad, a neo-trad, and to impugn our faith. And so it's always funny when I saw that response. And then I saw a response from a fairly well-known person on the Benny Papist side who said, these are the people who believe that they believe, I don't know particularly which version of it, the hypothesis they believe, but they believe that Benedict was the real pope, or that he never validly resigned. See, there's so many different versions of that one too. And they went nuclear on it also. And I'm just suggesting to people that none of that helps. Have your belief, debate it, whatever you want, but don't impugn people who don't agree with you. That's kind of the message of it. So I have that open letter will be discussed at 7 a.m. Standard or Central Time when that video goes live. Channel members have access to it already. It's an important message because the modernists in Rome are continuing to move to bury the traditional faith. As I told you yesterday, there was the story of a archbishop down in Brazil who basically said he's excommunicating anybody who goes to the Latin Mass. Okay. That idea is not going to be isolated to his diocese. It's going to catch on if he gets away with it. So we're going to go talk about this today. The main story of the morning is this one here. Oops, clicked the wrong button. Our main story is something some of you saw reported on John Henry Weston's podcast on YouTube. The headline is Catholic journalist detained outside Vatican, banner supporting Bishop Strickland confiscated. Anna Kulanova joins John Henry Weston on his podcast. She and her husband were detained by the Italian government after attempting to enter St. Peter's Square with a banner supporting deposed Bishop Strickland. So those who don't know, St. Peter's Square is actually policed by Rome, not by the Vatican. So this wasn't the Swiss Guard doing this. This was the Roman Gendarmerie. That's who was doing this. This isn't it was, again, not the Swiss Guard, even though, let's be real. The Swiss Guard would have done this too if it had been in their jurisdiction. But for some reason, St. Peter's Square, at least the entry to it, is a jurisdiction of the Italian government. And that's because the entrance to St. Peter's Square is how you get into the Vatican. So, but they were keeping an eye on banners for some reason. If you've seen enough crowd footage of St. Peter's Square, you'll be undoubtedly aware you don't see a lot of banners. You don't see a lot of that kind of thing. You do see a lot of the flags of the various, people from wherever that is that they're coming from, but they don't really like banners, apparently. Let's get some details from this quote. According to Kulanova, she, her husband, and a crew from Christianatis and Fatima TV attempted to enter St. Peter's Square for Sunday Angelus with a banner depicting an image of Bishop Strickland and the phrase, Slovakia stands with Bishop Strickland, with Kulanova carrying it. When the Italian police asked to see what was on the banner, not knowing who Strickland was, I have my doubts, honestly, she told them it was a bishop and a holy man. When the police called, quote, higher places to see if Kulanova could enter the square, she asked if anything was the matter, to which they responded that they needed to find out who Strickland was and that she would have to wait for a moment. She showed the police her ID. They took pictures of it, assured her she would not miss the Pope's Angelus address. The tenor of the meeting soon changed, however. As soon as they got the answer from higher places, they panicked, recalls Kulanova. They threw my banner away in the corner. I tried to look for my friends for support now and called my husband, who had all gone to St. Peter's Square earlier when with Slovak flags, end quote. Yes, I do sort of doubt that she didn't know who Bishop Strickland was, because Bishop Strickland is the news that dominated the entire Catholic world since the beginning of November until the Cardinal Burke story broke. And it's her own website reported it. So, okay. Doesn't know who it is, but okay. I tried to enter there, and Raven Ray says stormtrooper tactics. Could be a good way to describe it. Joseph asks if I keep wondering if I get up early in the morning on the West Coast to record late. Well, I live in Oklahoma, so I'm in the central standard zone, but I get up really early in the morning because my kids, I have small children and I live near a municipal airport, so it's much easier for me to do this stuff when they're asleep and there are no aircraft flying over my house. But this story is really indicative of where we are. Okay. Clearly the Vatican is worried about the optics of what went down with Bishop Strickland, because even the media, I told you, the secular media even reported this, and they were kind of scratching their heads about this. When the secular media, who usually celebrates everything Francis does, suggests that you may have gone too far, there's a problem for them. And this is reflective in even a lot of moderates standing up. Remember that story I told you about yesterday, Monsignor Charles Pope, who 2 days ago issued a very great statement saying that he, describing blunt terms what was going on and using the kind of language that would get him in trouble. Well, the next day he deleted the Facebook post and issued a new statement. And in his new statement, he said he was made aware that he was causing disunity in the church. It means he got a phone call or got a visit from somebody. They're very much aware that the Bishop Strickland situation could go very badly for them, but it's not stopping them, because I have a video for you later in the week or in the next couple of days about another bishop who has now caught the attention of Rome, who's getting an apostolic visitation for being too traditional, as well as a religious order that's getting an apostolic visitation for being too traditional, and all these kinds of things. So this is ongoing, and part of the way that they're going to get away with it is to control the flow of information about this stuff, and especially not bring it to the one place where there will be cameras on that they can't quite control the message if they allow people like this reporter in with the banner, and that's St. Peter's Square, because there will be media there filming the crowd, taking pictures. That's how we get the pictures of like half-empty St. Peter's Square when Francis gives an Angelus address. Hardly anybody goes to those things of his anymore. And they can't have that nightmare going on. So a lot of Catholics, even in the United States, who don't know who Bishop Strickland is, they don't even know that the story is going on. Or they default to believing that everything Francis does is good and that everybody supports him. And so they have to control the flow of information this way. So let's get back to this, though. She says, quote, when her husband arrived, he noticed the banner in the corner. He began filming, put it, meaning the banner, in the bag, and started walking toward the square. When the police asked to see what was in his bag, they found the banner, and Kulanova walked over to him, also filming. Both asked questions of the police, including what the Vatican's problem was with Strickland. The police then got a little nervous, denying Kulanova and her husband admittance to St. Peter's Square. A police officer had told them that Strickland was indeed a problem in the Vatican, and another said that the banner was also a problem in the Vatican. It was then that the police confiscated her camera. A police officer later told her that the trouble was indeed political. There it is. The police also confiscated the banner after Kulanova's husband returned it to her. They put the banner in their van and promised her that she would get it back at the police station, she maintains. While she still had her camera, the police attempted to get her to enter a police car. She refused, believing they would take her camera and delete anything on it. They surrounded her, would not let her leave. So this is a pretty big deal. And this is the kind of stuff we're talking about here, right? They're going to use stronger and stronger armed tactics to control the message. You just got to look at Traditionis Custodes to see that. I mean, look at how that document was a blunt instrument to try to get rid of the Latin Mass and push the most dedicated people to it, to essentially the outer fringes of any diocese. It's not a stretch to say that the next step will be to push those people to the SSPX and try to overwhelm the SSPX, because the SSPX doesn't have the facilities in most places to house all the people who are dedicated to the traditional liturgy in their facilities. They just don't have the resources for it. If you don't believe me, go find what the size of your SSPX parish is that's nearest to you, and it's probably going to be tiny. The one in Oklahoma, outside of Oklahoma City, is tiny. Okay, most of their places aren't anywhere near the size of St. Mary's. Your typical parish is bigger than most SSPX chapels that I've ever seen. Anthony says there's some really, really ridiculous. I can't quite say all that stuff on YouTube, but there's some ridiculous stuff going on in the parishes in Australia. It's bad. And this is why I think that statement that I'm covering in a couple of hours in a normal video on my channel is worth your time to check out. I honestly don't believe that any of us really knows how the truth of what's going on in Rome and how it's going to play out and be dealt with, except for a future pope is the only one who can do it. Our personal hypotheses, no matter how well researched they are, not everybody can be right about it, okay? And at some point, a future pope is going to correct what's going on in the church in our time. I pray that we'll be all alive to see it. But this is why, that's just one story like this, right? And then here's the other one. So you get this story. The synod is not over yet. So we get this from the National Catholic Reporter. Exclusive. Synod felt sorrow over the church's treatment of the ladies, says Bishop Flores. Flores is one of those who sometimes people tell us is one of the better ones. Okay. This is, again, for those who think the Synod of Sin was no big deal and that it's all over. It's not over. It goes back to his next meeting in October 2024. And they're going to go and reconvene not only about the James Martin topic, but also the issue of deaconettes. Because as you're going to see what Bishop Flores has to say, that's what's on the agenda. So from this article, quote, the bishops taking part in Pope Francis's recent major Vatican summit on the future of the Catholic Church wanted to express a certain amount of sorrow over how women have been treated by the faith institution, said one of the American prelates who took part in the gathering. In an exclusive interview with the National Catholic Reporter, Bishop Daniel Flores, who should know better than to give an exclusive interview to this outlet, of Brownsville, Texas, said the delegates of the October 4th to 29th Synod of Bishops wanted to show recognition of how the church has not, in her leadership or in the way it works, appreciated the sacrifice, and that in many parts of the world, what continues to make their church viable is the work of women. Here he's referencing the fact that most parishes, it's not just like the front end person answers the phones, but like their parishes are often managed by women who are professional nonprofit, who are trained often in nonprofit or business management, and that's who runs most of the offices. If you ever sat on a parish council, you know what I'm talking about. I have sat on a parish council in an ordinary form parish, so I know that this is the case. Flores, who is one of 12 U.S. bishops taking part in the October assembly, said the synod wanted to consider how to make the church a more perfect communion where we do more work cohesively in a mutual recognition of gifts. One of the synod's hopes, he said, is that we can model to the world, imperfect as we are, that there is a way to relate to each other that's not all about power and all about control. Flores, who is also the lead coordinator of the U.S. Bishops' national consultation process for the Synod, spoke to the National Catholic Reporter as part of the Vatican Briefing podcast. The article is a advertisement, essentially, for the newspaper's podcast. The bishop addressed the role of women in the church in response to a question about the synod's decision in its final document to postpone an action on the possibility of ordaining women as deacons. Okay, so they postponed it. A lot of people talked as if this was off the table. It's not. Flores said members of the 2023 Synod Assembly considered their final text an interim document, meaning just something as a placeholder until the October 24 meeting begins. We need some time to kind of go more deeply into what's marked there, he said in an interview on November 13th during the U.S. Bishop's annual Fall Assembly in Baltimore. He said that in the time between now and an expected Second Synod Assembly in October 2024, we need to rethink more about this text, but we need to think about it together and also think about it in the context of our local communities. I think there's some theological thinking that has to go on, at least initially during this year, to kind of help us sort of frame the questions, he said, end quote. In other words, we're going to spend the rest of this year going over that document and thinking about the issue of the lady deacons. And this is where synodality comes back into this. At the dawn of the synod meeting in October, what did Francis do? He issued a document. He said that priests could give blessings to the James Martin stuff. Priests, they didn't need the permission of their bishop. It was up to the individual priest. He gave some vague guidelines for it. It would not surprise me if this is how a diaconate the deacon question was finalized, was in a very similar kind of way, except because you're talking about an ordained ministry, it would have to be done through bishops, unless they don't do it ordained. If Francis issues a document that says the parish priest can create a deaconette, basically, who is not ordained, but acts in every way like someone who is ordained, that will crack the door open to the ordination question. This is the stuff going on right now. And this is why I fully actually like that document that was issued by an anonymous group of priests and lay theologians that I will be featuring here in about just over 2 hours on this channel, about how, despite our differences on the traditional side of things, about the question of Francis, the validity of Vatican II, and the hermeneutic of continuity, and all the things that divide us, we should have some mutual respect for each other while still believing what we believe and being willing to even debate it among ourselves if we want, but not have it be a source of division among us. That is the point of this. And this is why I saw, again, for those joining a little late, I caught some of the reactions from a set of a contest page that's very, very well known, one that I've cited on my channel news reports before, basically just dismissing it as being an anti-set of a contest thing, which it's not, or from another group that is very well known among those who are very pro Benedict was the real Pope, who dismissed it completely and accused those who would hold to it of being essentially having the sin of acedia, which is just grotesque on their part. It's important. We have to all be not on the same page about those finer questions, but on the same page about getting people to wake up what's going on in the church, and to make sure people don't get roped into essentially following this Pied Piper in Rome into the pit of heresy. That's where we are. I'm curious what people think about all this, because the John Henry Weston report, after you watch this, go to the LifeSite YouTube channel, go check that out if you haven't watched it. And just remember that even if it's like Christmas and it's Advent now, and a lot of people are starting to check out a little bit, they don't stop. 2 years ago, Traditionis Custodes was issued, and that was issued on the Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel in July 2021. In December of 2021, 3 or 4 days before Christmas, deep in the final days of Advent, they issued their dubia, or their response to a dubia about Traditionis Custodes, which actually made Traditionis Custodes so much worse. That happened during Advent. Okay, that they don't rest. I have done reports before on like the day after Christmas about weird stuff coming out of Rome that happened on Christmas Day. They never take a break. So why should we? Our principal job really is to let people know about the errors going on. Feel free to tell people about your position about the other things, whether you think Benedict is the real Pope or was, or that Francis was or wasn't the Pope, whatever. But having this be a source of division among traditional Catholics is not, this stuff, it's not worth it, because people will be lost. And I'm not the most eloquent speaker to defend this. I am sure that a lot of these other outlets have made to a response where it's just much more eloquently argued and it'll look like they dunked on me. I don't care. So I'm not here for people's adulation and praise. I'm just saying we really should try to work together while still holding to our principles. It can be done. Bay State Observer says there must be something in Italian law that will allow these reporters to take on those cops in the legal system. Well, the thing is, most of those places don't have our First Amendment. They just don't. So I don't know. If there are any final thoughts for us this morning or any questions, this is the time to put them to us. All right. Oh no, my cool leading man voice is going. Well, that's a good sign. That means I'm almost back to being healthy enough to go to the gym. I miss my workouts in the morning. I really do. I would like to get back to them. I really would. We shall see. If there are any further thoughts on this, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to sign off now. But I do have that story coming for you in about a little over 2 hours, and I'll have the links to these articles today that I mentioned here today in my show notes, along with the show notes for the news story that'll go live in a couple of hours. All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in today. May God bless you, and please pray for everybody involved in the stories that I spoke about today.